G'day everyone, welcome to Doctor Colin's Pop Culture Powwow for another week. I'm Doctor Colin and I'm going to be reviewing The Killing Joke, which is an adaptation of the Alan Moore, Brian Boland DC Comics masterpiece. Now, as a fan of the comic, I was really excited for this. Couldn't wait to sort of sink my teeth into it. And I'm going to be honest here, I was a bit disappointed. The adaptation of the comic is really good. They've stuck really closely to it, and the performances and the direction of it are superb. But the first sort of 30 minutes really dragged the whole experience down for me, and I think that seems to be, from what I've seen, the overall consensus, that it just doesn't work. And I'm going to tell you a bit about why. So, this is a spoiler-free bit. When I get into spoiler territory, I'm going to pop up a spoiler stamp so that you know to skip it or whatever. But this is a spoiler-free bit. So, overall, I'm just going to talk about what the prologue is, which is Brian Azzarello has written a bit to try and bulk out the runtime of the feature, because without that extra sort of 30 minutes, it'd only be about a 30-minute adaptation of a comic book, so it wouldn't be worth releasing on its own. So they've gone, well, what can we do? And let's do something with Batgirl, because she's an important part of the story. Now, it seems as though that's pretty much where the thought process began and ended with this. They haven't really done anything to make it overly engaging. Like, it's not the worst thing that they've ever written, but it just doesn't belong here. So to tack it onto an existing property that people have been hanging out for is kind of cheap. So you've got this opening prologue about Batgirl and her relationship with Batman, and how they're not getting along because her impulsiveness is getting her into trouble, and there's this mobster that they're after, and he's infatuated with her, and it sort of plays on that for a bit. There's a lot of kind of misogynistic stuff that comes from the bad guy, and he doesn't have anything to do with the Killing Joke at all, so again, it's jarring because he's not connected, and if you haven't read the comic, then you probably don't realise that, but when you do get to the adaptation of the comic, you'll be like, well, what's the point of that? So now I'm going to get into the more spoilery bits. So there's the stamp. Now, the most controversial thing in this adaptation comes in this prologue, and it's a bit that was written, I suppose, to try and drum up a bit of tension between Barbara and Bruce. And that is that there's a scene after she's gotten in trouble with the mobster. They're on the rooftop, Batman and Batgirl. They start arguing, she attacks Batman, they fight, and in that typical kind of superhero fashion, she's on top and they start having sex, as you do on a rooftop. And it tastefully sort of pans up so you don't actually see anything, you don't hear anything, it just kind of like hints at it. And that was enough for a lot of the fanboys to absolutely lose their marbles. And me personally, it didn't do anything for me. It didn't make me go, yeah, but it also didn't make me go, no. It just wasn't anything. It doesn't do anything for the plot, it doesn't do anything for the characters that couldn't have been done with something else. Like, if you just left it with them arguing, it still would have had that opportunity to have an awkward relationship between them, just in a slightly different context, and it would have ended up doing the same thing thematically and plot-wise. So it was pretty pointless. And you've got this bad guy who is constantly hitting on Batgirl. He's infatuated with Batgirl, and this whole thing of leaving clues for her to go and find what he's left for her, which was the dead mobster. Again, it wasn't particularly well written. Like, it really felt like they'd just gone with your basic kind of plot elements and just cobbled something together. So yeah, they could have done a lot more with it if they had to. And there's no real connection between this and the main adaptation. So I'm going to take this spoiler stamp down. There we go. And we're going to get into the actual adaptation side of it. Anyone who's read the comic pretty much knows what they're in for. This is almost like a straight adaptation. The words are almost lifted directly from the pages. The shots are almost completely replicating the artwork. There's some slight variations. That's about it. Mark Hamill's performance is on point, as always, and it's really great to see him finally take on this iconic piece of Joker lore. Kevin Conroy, again, always in fine form. It's not a lot for Batman to do in this one, but whatever it is that he's got to do, he does with gusto as usual. But this really is a Joker story. This is really about the Joker, and you know, the way that the scene at the Gordon apartment plays out, the suspense is fantastic. Even though I knew what was coming, I felt nervous, I felt worried. You know, I was really sort of absorbed in it, which was great, and that's what you want. And the way that, you know, the jokes roll out of the Joker, it's perfect. That scene pretty much was, I would hold that as the perfect moment in this adaptation, and it was always going to be one of the big moments. But overall, you know, I think that the script was good for the second half. I think that the acting was excellent. Where it really falls down, and this is where it always falls down with DC Animated, always, without fail, the artwork, the animation, just, it's cut price. It's obvious that they went with the cheapest, quickest option so that they could churn this thing out, and the production really suffers as a result. You know, you got jerky kind of movements. It doesn't feel natural, it doesn't look natural. The character designs are oversimplified, but they do retain kind of a basic resemblance to the Boland artwork. It's not really, it doesn't pop the way it should. And you know, people like Bruce Timm have said, oh, you know, there's no way that we could have accurately depicted the artwork, blah blah blah. But you know, about a week ago, before this thing came out, there was someone online, a fan, had gotten footage from the promos, and he'd gone over it and done sort of like, you know, some artwork to it to make it more closely resemble what Brian Boland did. And pretty much all he did was just add extra shadows and increase the contrast. And it worked. Like, that's the main thing that was kind of lacking, is that Brian Boland's artwork in The Killing Joke relies very heavily on the use of light and shade. The way that the characters pop has a lot to do with the way that he shades the artwork, and that's what creates the tone and the mood. Whereas if you just have, like, you know, normal kind of cartoon characters, it doesn't do the artwork justice, it doesn't do the director justice, doesn't do the performances justice, and really Warner should have spent more time and money on this project if they wanted to do it justice. And really, it just says to me, all they were interested in was getting it out and making money off of it, which is unfortunate, because it is one of my favourite comics, always has been. You know, my copy's tattered because I've read it that many times, and they could have done so much more with it. But you know, I would suggest, if you're really passionate about the comic, just, you know, skip the first half, the prologue, go straight into the comic adaptation, and try and use that as like an audio book version as you're reading along in the comic, because that's pretty much what it's good for. So let's get down to the nuts and bolts, and you know, what do I give the film as a rating. So I'm actually going to do 2 ratings, because I'm going to rate the adaptation and I'm going to rate the overall thing. So the adaptation, the second half that was actually adapting the comic, I'm going to give that a 9 out of 10. Could have been a 10 out of 10 easily, but the artwork really ruined it for me. But the overall presentation, I'm going to give it like a 5 out of 10, because really it's riding on the coattails of the comic's reputation, and that prologue really drags down the quality tremendously. So my suggestion is, if you get the copy of this movie on DVD or Blu-ray, skip the prologue part of it, go straight into the adaptation and enjoy it as like a short film, because that's the bit that works. It's not connected intrinsically with the plot of the second half, so if you don't watch it, it doesn't matter. There you go. Alright, so that was my review of The Killing Joke, and I'd like to hear your comments if you agree, if you disagree, and I'm going to show you some links here. You can go and look at some of my other stuff. If you enjoyed this review, click like. If you want to see more stuff, press subscribe. Either way, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.